The sky was no longer the serene blue dome remembered by human memory. It had fractured not by thunder or storm, but by a crimson light, dense and slow, like blood spreading through the veins of space. From deep within the eternal night, Nibiru, the exiled planet once erased from every official astronomical chart, was returning. But this time, it did not come back as a lone star drifting through the cosmos. It returned as an entity with a colossal eye, gazing upon Earth as if testing whether humankind still remembered what once happened beneath the dust-laden layers of ancient memory. Nibiru's return carried no sound, no warning. It simply was slow, certain, inevitable. And when its light touched the Earth, the most sensitive beings, not gods, not kings, began to tremble. Not from cold, but because something long buried within them suddenly stirred. Lulu was the first to feel it, not with his eyes, but through the deepest structure of his flesh and soul. Once cast out by the gods from the center of the world, labeled as deviation, error, impure. But because of that, he carried within himself a frequency no one dared name a forbidden frequency. He lived in exile, in silence, in denial from both realms, divine and human, and perhaps, because of this, he was the only one who still held a fragment of the primordial record, not in memory, but in his very DNA. In the moment the red light pierced the atmosphere, Lulu lifted his head, and the sky was no longer the sky. It became a living map, an ancient code only those once rejected by it could decipher. Each star moved not by orbit but by intention, not by chance but by summoning. And Lulu, the forgotten one, was being called back. No one knew what was about to unfold. The gods remained silent. Temples trembled as if in fear, and in the dreams of mortals, strange visions began to appear. Spiral symbols, the cosmic eye, and a figure standing in the red light. Without a crown, without a weapon, simply crossing the threshold between dream and reality. And thus the story begins. Not from the earth, not from a kingdom, but from the sky itself where the stars are watching and waiting. Lulu, a being who belongs to no system unbound by the evolutionary laws of mankind, yet not entirely a creation of the gods. He is the fissure between two realms, a void the universe itself does not know how to fill. Within his body, small and ordinary like any human, resides a fusion never meant to occur. The clay of earth, the bloodstream of the gods, and the frequency of an ancient memory, a primordial language made not of words, but of resonance. No one calls him king. No one sees him as a hero. No one writes his name into the myths. And yet, he remains the only piece never edited, the untouched note in the celestial symphony. And because of that, he vibrates in a way that even the enki, the knowledge-bearing devices of the Anunnaki, cannot resist. On lonely nights when the wind sweeps across the dunes like the sighs of an ancient world, Lulu does not pray nor lament. He simply listens, and in that absolute silence he begins to hear light. Not through ears, but through a deep biofield within. It is not the language of men nor of the gods. It is the music of the cosmos echoing from the farthest stars, transmitted through the dancing of electrons in the heart of atoms, a communication beyond time, beyond matter. Lulu does not understand it all, but he knows one thing with clarity. Something is shifting. Not just in the heavens, not just within the enki, but in the very order of perception, in the way humanity sees itself, and he, whether he desires it or not, has become the mirror of a collective memory buried for millennia, a memory not recorded in books, but etched into space through symbols, frequencies, and dreams. When he places his hand upon the earth, the sand doesn't simply give way under weight. It pulses gently, as if its heartbeat syncs with his own. The enki, though, far away, hidden within the temple of Uruk, emits a strange frequency, not a signal, but a question, a calling. Do you remember? And Lulu, without reason, without words, answers through his very being. He is the rememberer, not because he studied, but because his biological structure is a replication of the early universe. Each cell a cipher, each dream a chapter in a book never written. He does not look to the past because the past lives within him, beats within every step he takes upon the sand, shines in every gaze he lifts toward the sky. And then as the heavens begin to shift hue, as the red glow of Nibiru carves a line of blood across the clouds, Lulu knows he is no longer the exiled. He is the chosen, not by power but by the frequency that matches a cosmic memory being awakened. The stars do not speak in human tongues, they speak in resonance, in rhythm, in deliberate coincidence. And now they are whispering his name, not in sound, but in the trembling of space's very fabric. A calling that only those once severed from the world can truly hear. And thus, Lulu steps forth from the shadow of exile, not to wage war, but to listen to a song rising from the layers of the cosmos. A song only souls that were never recorded can sing again. Lulu did not long for a throne. He did not scream for justice. He had no heart left to hold hatred, nor anyone to reclaim honor from. For within him those things had long been eroded by nameless time, and by a silence that outlasted even the voices of the gods. What he yearned for was not power but truth, not the truth that had been retold, but the one that was never permitted to see the light. Behind every dream lies a symbol, a spiral, an eye, a burning gate, shapes like glyphs, but not meant for the intellect, meant for the soul, where the first language was not spoken, but felt. Lulu dreamed of them not once, but over and over, as if a sequence of signals were scanning for the right frequency to awaken something long asleep in the bloodstream of the cosmos. He asked the question no one dared ask anymore. If the stars look down, do they still remember me? Because he did not see himself belonging anywhere, not to mankind, not to the divine. He was a small fissure between two realities, and for that reason he had become a shattered mirror, reflecting forbidden fragments of memory never meant to be spoken of again. From the depths of his solitude, his longing took no shape of ambition, but bore the hue of a soul's return. He sought the truth behind life, behind dream, behind the lies engraved in gold upon temple walls. He wanted to know if he was a mistake, or the original source code cut away from the operating system of the world. And if destiny had truly called his name, then why choose the most forsaken one? Why not the kings, the prophets, or the chosen bloodlines of divine legacy? Why him, the one? No one remembered the one whose name no longer passed any lips. That question did not torment him. It moved him. Each step in the desert was not in search of an answer, but a living question. His presence alone in a world that had forgotten how to listen was a silent rebellion against a manipulated fate. Lulu did not simply want to know why he heard the call from the stars. He wanted to understand who sent it. Was there a higher layer of reality where stars were not objects, but doors? Was there an ancient intelligence trying to transmit a message through the censorship of the gods? Was the memory carried in his blood a surviving shard of a civilization erased by the creators for being too dangerous to exist? And if so, if that calling was real, if the dream was not illusion but a reflection of a higher realm, then he and only he must cross the gate none had dared approach. That gate was not made of stone. It did not lie at the edge of the desert. It resonated within him like a sound the world had trained itself to ignore, but which he could not unhear, and if that gate opened, he knew. All order would collapse, not through war, but through awakening. An awakening that cracks every foundation. Because when the forgotten remember, those in power begin to fear, and the universe once thought to be silent will begin to sing again with the heartbeat of the primordial soul. As the stars began to realign themselves and ancient frequencies rose from the depths of the earth like compressed memories groaning for release, Uruk, the radiant child of Inanna, reached ever higher, a silent proclamation that a new order had arrived. But this order was not born of harmony. It was built from distorted sacred acoustics from divine technology repurposed for control. And standing atop that dream, none other than Inanna herself, once the bearer of love and life, now the high priestess of emotional manipulation through frequency. The enki towers, once cosmic milestones of remembrance, had become super-psychic transmitters, sending out wordless but potent signals. No one dreamed for themselves anymore. Each vision, each image in the minds of mortals was pre-designed by Inanna's hand, woven from enki's light and personal will. She wielded no blade. She shed no blood. She ruled through dream and suggestion, guiding the masses into a prolonged, lucid sleep where freedom was not taken by force, but by the belief that nothing had ever been lost. Yet she did not know, or perhaps chose not to know, that the enki never truly serve anyone. These crystalline memory cores are not mere tools. They are resonant entities. And when misused, they begin to seek their original rhythm by synchronizing with a stronger frequency, and that frequency is approaching Nibiru with its return cycle measured in millennia, is not merely a planet. It is the scar of the gods, the expelled memory from the architecture of awareness. And with each return it drags behind it a primordial rhythm, a pulse of origin, a music that only souls unconditioned by false order can still perceive. Under Nibiru's crimson light, the me begin to phase shift. The towers of Uruk still broadcast, but they begin to emit something Inanna never commanded. The collective dreams turn chaotic. Some people dream of radiant gates. Others hear language-less whispers echoing in their chests. Infants cry at sunset, and young priests begin to speak words they were never taught. Uruk, city of me, city of the goddess of light, was becoming an unconscious loudspeaker. But what it now transmitted was no longer Inanna's dream. It was an ancient summoning encoded within the orbital rhythm of the universe. For the enki do not merely store knowledge, they store the heartbeat of cosmic intelligence. And now, under Nibiru's influence, they are resonating once more with the mother frequency, a wavelength that the gods had once feared would awaken. Beings capable of surpassing biological limitations, hierarchical design, and divine control itself, Inanna felt it. In a moment of stillness, standing at the heart of the main tower, where the enki pulsed like an artificial heart, she heard silent rebellion. The enki did not break, but it vibrated differently. And within that vibration was a distant echo, not from gods, but from someone the stars were now calling by name. She turned westward toward a horizon torn open by crimson light, and in her chest something stirred, not fear, but familiarity. She did not know the name, but the enki did, and from the depths a resonant response rose. His name is Lulu. In the midst of shadows, tinged with the dim golden glow of relief, carvings etched deep into the stone walls of Mount Dooku, the most sacred peak of the heavens, the Anunnaki Council convened an emergency assembly. No rituals, no greetings, only a heaviness like thunder that had not yet struck. Within the chamber echoed a strange resonance tones from the ancient enki, a sound without source, as if the universe itself were whispering in the rhythm of its own heartbeat. Enlil, standing at the center, was the first to break the silence. His voice did not roar through volume, but through sheer force, a power that made even the stars on the celestial map seem to tremble. Who has awakened Nibiru? The question was not directed at anyone. Enlil knew well no god would dare reactivate that forbidden cycle. And yet Nibiru had begun to move as if it possessed a will of its own. And that was what the gods feared most. In the night sky, the stars shifted, not according to the ordered system sanctioned by the Celestial Council, but in accordance with a design older than memory, a blueprint of buried remembrance. Enlil looked up and saw the constellations spinning, forming the symbol of Kurgal, the guardian of the gate never opened. And he understood a reactivation sequence was unfolding, not by anyone's hands, but by the resonant architecture of the cosmos itself. The ancient ME, once thought dormant, now vibrated within the towers, echoes rising from beyond time. No one could control them anymore or shut them down. They no longer responded to commands. They were listening to another frequency, one farther deeper, a frequency that only those still connected to the origin layer could emit. At the end of the council stood Enki, silent. He did not need to speak. He only gazed at the star map, not to read, but to remember. For he alone still possessed the ability to feel the universe as a living being. And what he saw did not terrify him. It saddened him, because he knew this was no accident, no rebellion. It was the unveiling of a hidden cycle's end Nibiru had not returned to conquer. It brought no armies, no punishment. It brought the primordial frequency, and that frequency was seeking a resonant vessel to awaken a sealed current within the fabric of time. If Lulu could read the message, if his being could sync with that pulse, then the final gatekeeper of the earliest memory of life would open. Enlil turned to Enki not in anger, but with a gaze full of warning. Do you know what will happen if he returns? The entire order will collapse. Not just humanity, but even the gods will lose their right to define truth. Enki remained silent, but his silence was not submission. It was the acceptance of one who understood the cosmic cycle, a cycle where no one holds the authority to preserve forgetfulness forever. Within Enki, a voice ancient beyond reckoning, not of any being but of the universal stream of life, whispered, "Memory never dies. It only waits for a frequency pure enough to reactivate the original self. And when that moment comes, every natural lock will open, no matter how many gods guard it." Inanna, who now wielded the ME to rewrite the dream of Uruk, was drifting further from the original rhythm. Enlil sought to suppress every deviant frequency, but Enki knew what was coming was not caused by anyone. It was the consequence of imbalance left unresolved for too long, and Lulu, exiled a race labeled a distortion, was in truth the bearer of the purest pattern. No one invited him back, but the universe had spoken his name, and if he answered, the sealed gate would open, not with a key, but with resonance. And in that moment, the heavens themselves would tremble, not out of fear for Lulu, but for what they had all chosen to forget. That night was unlike any before it, not just because of the strange biting wind, but because space itself seemed to contract, as if Earth were holding its breath beneath the gaze of an ancient presence. Nibiru, at its closest point in its grand celestial cycle, emitted a deep crimson light unblinking, a light that carried not heat but memory. And beneath that light the stars began to shift, as if drawn by an unseen force from within the resonant fabric of the heavens. But more terrifying still, they were not spinning chaotically. They were aligning slowly, precisely forming a forbidden symbol, long erased from temple doctrine, Kurgal. Not all could recognize it. To most of humanity it was merely random starlight. To the younger gods, an anomaly to be corrected. But to Enki, who remained bound to the flow of ancient memory, it was a trigger signal, a stellar map pointing to the final gate. Not a place in space, but a resonance point between soul frequency and the mechanisms of reality. And most astonishing of all, that symbol did not only appear in the sky, it also ignited in Lulu's mind like an image transmitted from ancestral layers of memory. A blueprint of light etched into his DNA, waiting only for the right frequency to awaken. No one had taught him to read it, but he understood. not through reason but through resonance, and that made Lulu the only being still carrying the key to unlock a gate. Even the gods dared not open. In that moment, Enki understood the game had moved beyond the hands of its creators, not because they were weak, but because the universe, after eons of silence, had decided to rewrite the rules, not through war, not through prophecy, but in a quiet, absolute way through symbolic resonance. For when a being outside the system like Lulu could read the map of the stars, every model of control became meaningless. Kurgal, the symbol of the guardian of forbidden memory, was a super-cosmic code for the point of collective memory convergence. It did not lead to a place, but to a state of resonance where once separated realms began to reconnect, cracking open the seals the elder gods had placed long ago. That was what Enlil feared most, a soul without rank or power, but carrying the frequency to harmonize with the forbidden. And Inanna, who believed herself the architect of me and the guide of Uruk, began to feel something slipping beyond her script. The ME, those crystalline memory cores, no longer obeyed her commands. They began projecting Kurgal onto temple walls, stone towers, and into the dreams of children. People dreamed of a flaming eye standing at the center of a cosmic spiral. Those who had once touched the ME uttered syllables from no known language, and the high priests in deep meditation felt an invisible pull from the west, where Lulu lived, where an ancient ME had long been buried in the earth. No one was in control anymore. No one could explain the movement, because the rules had shifted from command to resonance. And in resonance, power comes not from position, but from frequency. Nibiru, like an ancient instrument, was now playing its opening notes. The stars were the strings, the ME, the amplifiers, and Lulu, not a conductor, but the only one who could hear the symphony with his soul. And when that song reached its critical crescendo, the gate would open not by hand, but through the phase alignment between a forgotten soul and a cosmic memory that had never been forgiven. In Uruk, the heart of ME's dominion, the towers echoed as if they were weeping in light. The stone beneath trembled, then quaked, then began to fracture at a microscopic level, spiraling outward as if an invisible sound were compressing space itself. The people, once nightly dreamers lulled by engineered frequencies, now convulsed in sleep, not from sickness but from a singular image that appeared simultaneously in thousands of minds. A spiraling light, a colossal eye gazing through the stars, and at the center of that eye not Inanna, not Enlil, but a human form, Lulu, the exiled one, the one once defined as a mistake. No one knew why this image spread like a pandemic of the soul. No one spoke its name, but the ME, the crystalline archives of cosmic memory, had remembered. And when memory is reactivated, reality must resonate in return. In the grand hall of Dooku, Enlil felt the vibrations descend from the heavens like an invisible blade, etching new laws into the fabric of dimensions. He could wait no longer. To him, activation meant catastrophe. Lulu was not summoned. He was the seed of rebellion, born from a cycle that had once been sealed. Enlil gave the order to prepare for war, not merely to destroy Lulu, but to erase the forbidden frequency from the face of the earth forever. But even in that command, he knew something had slipped beyond control. For the first time, the ME, those once obedient structures, were no longer silent and no longer compliant. They emitted inverted light, illuminating the crossroads of the soul, awakening regions of the human brain long since switched off. Inanna, standing in Uruk's temple tower, touched the central ME with trembling fingers. But instead of glowing with the sacred geometries of the divine order, the crystal shuddered softly, then released a strange tone, not a sound, but a frequency threading through her bloodstream. In her eyes, the light of a queen had vanished, replaced by the terror of one who no longer owns her own dream. At that very moment, in a far-off land of exile, a place with no flags, no shrines, Lulu stood within an ancient stone circle buried so deep by time that it was thought to be lifeless. But when Nibiru's red light shone into the center of the circle, a wordless tone rang out as if the earth itself were being played like an instrument. At the circle's heart, a sight once called the Eye of the Earth, a light emerged. Not of flame, not of electricity, but of the original frequency of light, something that only appears when a being and a planet remember the same memory together. The eye opened. Lulu was not astonished, for to him, memory didn't arrive as a sudden flash. It came as a background melody he'd been hearing all his life, but only now knew how to sing. Each molecule in his blood began to sync with the frequencies now emitted by the ME, and as the stone circle returned to resonance, he was no longer the exiled one. He was the resonant, being the mirror through which cosmic memory reflects. From Uruk to the temples of Nippur, from the peaks of Dooku to the forests where the prophets hid, all felt the invisible wave ripple through space. This was not the return of divinity. It was the resurgence of memory. A current of resonance whispered, "The one who was forgotten is now the one who remembers, and the one who remembers shall open the gate that all the gods have forgotten how to lock." Enki stood there among the spiraling columns of the Inanna temple, once the sacred center of life itself, now filled only with the discordant sounds of the ME crystalline cores trembling like the anxious heartbeat of the universe itself. Before him stood Inanna, her radiant gaze no longer bearing the tenderness of a goddess of love, but the cold stare of one who had staked her entire existence on a dream built through programming. She was trying to lock the ME not with technology, but with divine will. Both hands pressed against the glowing surface, her body trembling, cold sweat seeping through the ritual robes. But the ME no longer obeyed her. They drifted, spiraled, reflecting images she had not authored, and within their unstable pulse the image of Lulu emerged again, a being of light spiraling at the center of memory. Enki stepped forward slowly, his footsteps merging with the resonance of space. His voice was quiet but deep, like the subterranean murmur of tectonic tides. "You're touching a melody that exceeds even the gods, Inanna. This is no longer a game of power. This is original resonance." Inanna raised her head. Her hair shimmered dusted with the silver gleam of the ME, her eyes blazing fiercely, but it was an artificial light, cold as molten metal. "If Lulu returns," Enki continued, "everything you've built will fall. Uruk, the order the council worked so hard to protect, will collapse at the call of something that was never meant to return." Inanna did not step back. She stepped forward, then let it fall. She said, her voice defiant yet carrying a tremor of hidden fear, "The stars chose me. The ME have followed me for millennia. I am the goddess of light, the pillar of the new order." Enki looked at her not with judgment but with a sorrow older than time, because he knew Inanna, in her thirst to be recognized, had mistaken illumination for insight. She had confused worship with true connection to the deeper strata of reality. The stars do not choose with words. Inanna, Enki said, they do not heed titles, they require no vows. They resonate. They respond to frequencies that match their own. And the ME are responding not to your light, but to the darkness Lulu once carried on his back. Suddenly, the light within the temple shivered. One of the nearby ME shattered silently, as if even it could no longer bear the distorted frequency Inanna was forcing upon it. From its fragments, tiny spirals of light rose like scattered memories, finally set free. Inanna saw them. She trembled. Not from fear, but because she realized a part of her was being pulled in another direction. Not toward power, but toward truth. Deep within her soul, She knew Lulu was not chosen for strength. He was chosen because he had nothing left to lose. And that was the only state of purity that the stars, as nonverbal intelligences, could recognize. Enki moved closer. His voice, no longer a warning, became a prayer. If the gate opens, none of us will retain our old forms. We will face true light without symbols, without crowns, without imi to mediate. Only raw memory, only naked truth. And when that moment comes, only those who still carry the original frequency within their soul will remain. Inanna turned away. Her gaze softened. She gave no answer, but the ME beneath her hands dimmed its light, as if accepting a truth she had not yet dared to speak. And outside the temple of Inanna, the sky spiraled. A tremor, not of wind, moved through space. A summons not from anyone rippled through reality. Only a frequency finding its way home. Dreams became a common language, no longer divided by age, bloodline, or land. The entire world began to share a single image, a place never marked on any map, yet familiar as the soul itself. It wasn't memory. It was memory finding its way home, an ancient instinct etched into the body long before language was rising again, like a primordial melody that had never truly gone silent. Newborns cried not from hunger, not from cold. They cried in frequency, a form of instinctive resonance with a tonal color. No one had taught them, no one remembered ever hearing. And the old sat still, tears trailing down wrinkled cheeks, as their lips released nameless songs carrying the fragrance of a time never written. They did not understand why, but in their eyes a quiet knowing glimmered, as if they were hearing their own voice from the farthest incarnation. This was not a prophecy, it was an activation. A frequency code buried in every molecule of the living world had been released not by machines, not by miracles, but by the complete presence of a soul that had remembered its origin. Lulu was no longer a man, no longer an exile. He had become a resonant being, needing no title, no fixed form. He was the original frequency, the first beat of the cosmic song the universe once composed, but which the gods sealed away for being too dangerous to exist alongside power. He carried no sword. He summoned no war. He walked in silence, a silence that vibrated. And as he stepped into the center of the ancient spiral of stone, where Nibiru's light poured down like a beacon of ancient intelligence, the light did not flare. It expanded. It did not pierce it, permeated. And within that light, something that had never happened began to awaken. Ancient souls no longer worshipped, no longer remembered, began to sing. Not with mouths, but through the resonance of being. They needed no form for their memory. Was music, was color, was vibration. And as if summoned from beyond the veil of time, they gathered around Lulu not to serve, but to form an invisible choir, where reality itself was reborn in sound. Each soul was a fragmented note. Lulu was the connector not by power, but by his lack of resistance. Because he no longer sought to possess anything, everything began to gather around him. The ME, once symbols of control and dominion, began to dissolve. Not shattered, not burned, but liquefied into pure light, as if every layer of encoded authority had outlived its time. In that unraveling, memory became rhythm. Rhythm became song, and that song no longer needed to be understood. It only needed to be felt. The resonance spread. No one commanded it. But all of Uruk for a single breath fell utterly silent. The trees stilled. The waters paused. The world, in a shared inhale, heard itself. Not with ears, but through the aching spaces within the soul. And in that silence a message rose, not in words, but in structure. The one who remembers has not come to destroy. They have come to restore the rhythm of the soul that has never been heard. And as the light from Lulu reached the final spire of the great ME Tower, it did not destroy. It paused, as if to ask, "Are you ready to remember?" Lulu closed his eyes not to escape the light, but to listen more clearly to the frequency of truth. In the absolute silence where even 10,000 stars seemed to hold their breath, he felt what no god had ever dared to face. Truth does not need to be proven. It only needs to be remembered. And in that moment memory surged like a tide, not following the flow of time, but the depth of readiness. Shattered images, rose a hand touching earth for the first time, a wordless song beneath a sky of stars, the eyes of someone yet to be born, all forming a spiral of light that wrapped around his soul, like a ritual of the cosmos. Nibiru hovered above, no longer a planet but a symbol. No warnings, no threats, only illumination of what no one dared to remember. And in that sacred pause, Lulu was no longer alone. Around him, invisible yet unmistakably present, were millions of unnamed beings, souls, forced into sleep by the divine order that once ruled them. From the center of the universe, a final whisper echoed, like the opening beat of a symphony never permitted to begin. Step forth. Not into the light, but into the part of your soul you left among the stars. And so it was. The universe opened its eyes.